and welcome back to my YouTube channel. If you're new here, I'm Tasneem Abrahams, and this is the Private Practice Growth Club. Today, as you know, I often feature practice owners who have been around the block, who we can learn from. And I actually want to welcome you to somebody who I actually surprised myself that I hadn't invited on already. I actually messaged Phumla and said, I was looking through my featured practice list and I realized I didn't get you on. And I was like, why? So I'm really happy to have you on, Phumla Motsa from Motsa Health. And I'm going to just let you introduce yourself. Tell us a bit about you, who you are, what you do, and what your practice is all about.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Tasneem. I'm Phumla, and I work as an occupational therapist in Johannesburg. My key things that I really focus on is ergonomics, and I also have a group practice where I'm an associate called WorkLink based in Auckland Park. And then I also have another side hustle business called where we run a business coaching training group with Leaders Library called Grow Your Healthcare Practice.
Amazing. So, Phumla, you are obviously an occupational therapist. I'd like to hear from you. I like to always ask my featured practice owners, why did you become an occupational therapist? Take us all the way back to when you first enrolled into the degree.
You know, I was tossing between medicine and OT, and I had been chatting to my mom, who's a registered nurse, and went into a doctor's rooms, and I was just like, no, I can't sit and listen to people's problems every day, all day. And then I thought, no, this is not going to work. And so I'm originally from Eswatini, Swaziland, which is across the border. And so we actually drove from Swaziland to Johannesburg, and I went into Joburg Gen, and I shadowed the OT department, and I just fell in love with the activity-based part of it. And the OTs were so friendly and so kind, and I thought, no, this is what I want to do. So a little bit of the medical stuff, because I've always been interested in it, but I think the function really drew something out of me. So I was really excited about that.
So had you heard about occupational therapy prior to that?
No, I mean, at the time, I don't think there was a single OT that I know of in Swaziland. So I literally did like a search with my mom's help. And then we landed on OT. I mean, I had even done like psychometric tests to figure out what field I wanted to go in. And no one had mentioned OT. It was all like engineering or, medicine or pharmaceutical stuff. But I think my mom knew my heart. So she was like, no. And then we settled on OT, but we both didn't really know what it was. So then we had to physically, do the 4-hour drive and see an OT working.
Yeah. So when you were studying occupational therapy, obviously we cover so many broad areas, undergrad. While you were a student, did you kind of already have an idea of where you'd like to focus when you were finished, or was there a particular interest area that you were very interested in?
Well, this is my story. All my friends love children, right? All the OTs were like, I'm going to be a peds OT. I love kids. And I like children, but I don't love children. And I have children of my own, and I've kind of settled in that. So I think right from day one, I knew that I didn't want to be a peds OT. So that was like out of the question. And this was like there was cherry on the top when in my final 4th year pediatric practice, I had set up this beautiful activity. And the 6-year-old beautiful boy just messed up my activity completely. And I failed my practice. And so I was like, yes, peds is not for me. And I walked out of that session with Pat DeWitt going, and I was like, no.
Oh, was it Pat DeWitt on top of it?
Terrible, Tasneem. You know when you go into the exam room and they're like, so what do you think you could have done better? It's not like evaluate the session. It was such a disaster that the only question they could really ask me is like, what are you not going to do next time?
Yes.
So, it was completely out of the picture. And then when I was at my 4th year, I went to Netcare Rehab and I did my prac there. And I really
Okay.
just clicked with the place. Like I just walked in and something inside of me was like, I actually have to work here. So I did the very best I could during my block, and it was like towards the end of the year. And then after ComServe, I applied straight to go in because I knew at that point I was going to do physical and rehab. And then when I was at Netcare, they were opening up the vocational rehabilitation part. So they really wanted to start early intervention from rehab into work. So we were encouraged to engage with employers on the progress of their employees, with the potential of discussing that early on. And then around the same time, I did my diploma in vocational rehab with Tanya Basin at UP, and kind of developed a program for Netcare with that in mind. So at that point, the whole return to work Vox stuff was pretty much ingrained in my clinical skills and in my thinking. And then one of my really good friends from varsity was working at Alexander Forbes around that same time. And she was like, they're looking for someone. So then I put my application through, and yeah, within a month or whatever the period was, I then started working there. And then when I started working there, again, now this is more like, it's the VOC because it's the return to work, but it's also data analysis and lots of presentation. So then I had to hone in on my presentation skills and my data analytical skills there. And also there was so many management opportunities and leadership. I mean, I did my Harvard mentorship program through Alexander Forbes when I was there, which was an excellent program in kind of getting you affair with business related aspects. And I think my favorite thing about being there was being able to stand in boardrooms and give feedback to executives about wellness, to give feedback about someone who had a stroke, and then kind of giving them a plan on how we can get that person back to work and what structures needed to be changed there in the organization. So that was really that was a really good space for me. Yeah.
So that was your journey from university to currently. That the area that you are primarily practice in, return to work for career. Tell us about what your current area of specialty is.
So after Alexander Forbes, so I did about 8 years there. Then I started my own practice, and there I did functional capacity evaluations mainly. That's when I joined WorkLink Association, and then case management. So those were my primary two OT kind of related tasks that I did there. And then because we all evolve, life evolves. You have new ideas. You want to try different things, and then I branched more into ergonomics. And did training around ergonomics, and then started creating products. And that's probably when we met, around that time. So that was more like an entrepreneurial branch for me now, because the way ergonomics is set, it does have a lot of technical stuff associated with it, but because of the market and kind of where we are with the regulation, with it being it was at 2019 that the regulation was promulgated, and I'm sitting at 2020 when I started doing ergonomics. I realized that the market wasn't necessarily going to lap it up. When you're doing functional capacity evaluations or case management, those are established programs. They're OTs that have gone before and have just laid such a beautiful road for the rest of us to get a template and just kind of get a referral and move along those lines. Where else with ergonomics, it was a lot of like backwards and forwards and processes, and what do you do, and do they need this, and can I do it, am I qualified, can OTs do it? There's just all of these things around it. So then I piqued my interest, so I am still pressing into that from an ergonomics point of view. And then now, because I'm developing products that are not necessarily 100% OT, then I had to up my skill set from a business point of view. So sales, pitches, marketing, material, all those things. And so then I joined a number of business related groups now. So, not OT or ergonomics necessarily, but just like from a business point of view, how do you get investors and how do you pitch for information? And that really helped to assist in pushing the business side of everything forward. And then I kind of now I still do the ergonomics, but at least that's like product. So I've kind of done that, develop a process and let it run on its own. I mean, I do need to market and do that. And then I'm kind of focusing my attention more on the business side of it because it's fascinating. There's just so many elements to it. Yeah.
So there's two questions I have off of that. Firstly, let me start with what fascinated or what piqued your interest in ergonomics? So what made you actually, shift your focus in that direction from where you currently were?
I think it was more, I think I was sitting and it was looking at, can I do functional capacity evaluations until I'm 65? What systems can I put in place from a ending point of view? By the time I started ergonomics, I had already started discussing business. I already started having business type of conversations, and the conversations I often had were the questions that were asked to me by my coaches and mentors was, well, when you stop this, if you sell it, how much are you going to make out of it? I don't know. If you are sick for a month, how are you going to sustain your kids and feed them? So I think my interest in ergonomics actually came more from a product development point of view and financial security than anything else. Like I enjoy it. I like the technical side, and because I have the technical knowledge, I just felt well positioned to kind of put it together. So I joined an ergonomics group of international consultants. I went through their training program. I put in the hours in understanding the office ergonomics and the industrial ergonomics. I did reports and I submitted them for review. And then I tried to do, and I did them myself, and I learned and I tweaked, and I'm still learning and tweaking as I go along. But I think my interest was really a business product one, and then also just the fact that it fits beautifully within return to work, because it's just it's often part of what we look at.
Yeah. I find it interesting listening to you from having heard your backstory that you mentioned that, when you did psychometrics, engineering was one of the things that came up. So it's kind of beautiful to see how, even though it's not engineering, it's very similar in, the things that you're mentioning that you find interesting about it, the technical aspects, product development is very much aligned with an engineering kind of mindset. So that's quite fascinating that you've come full circle, but in a space that is more aligned with your heart and your values, like you said, that your mom recognized in you quite early. So that's quite beautiful to hear. And then my other question was, you mentioned that you were at Alexander Forbes and then you went into private practice. So talk to us a little bit about that transition. What made you decide to go into practice on your own?
That's funny. It's funny because all the things I teach now of people wanting to move, I did not do. So I always start my classes when I'm teaching on the business side, like, don't do what I did. I my backstory. My husband passed away suddenly in 2015, and I was in a bit of a fix because I was like, well, I need to raise these two boys. I mean, my boys were 5 and 3 at the time, and he was so hands-on in his parenting, and I was so hands-off because I absolutely loved what I did, and I was just always mainly in the office. So I was like, well, this is not going to work anymore. And I had to transition out of that. So me opening a practice was literally in a period of grief. And so I did a free fall. I just walked in one day and I was like, hey, guys, I need to get some time out. And so I had 3 months to do my resignation period. And then I left and I did locum work, and I didn't have a plan. I didn't have much of a plan. And I remember that first December, I went home crying and I said to my dad, I have no money. I can't feed my kids. And I'm just going to move back to Swaziland and live with you. And I'm going to be your PA for your accounting firm. My dad's an accountant. At which point he looked at me and he's like, no, that's not going to work. You're not living off me at the age of 33. That's not a plan. And so he just said, go back. He's been running a business most of my life. So he's like, this is the basic, have this plan, approach people, ask how you can assist. And then that's how I then approached WorkLink, the current practice I'm at, submitted my CV. I mean, I did know them because they're physically at Netcare and I worked there before, had an interview with them, and then they allowed me to join as one of the associates. But as an associate, I still need to bring my own clients. I still need to bring my own, work through in there. And then I had a friend of mine who really is a business coach himself, but from a friendship point of view, he really helped me to develop systems, create like a soft CRM system, have a sales pitch. And it helped to be with older therapists because they already had contacts. So because I slotted in under their banner and they're already established, so my referral process was a little easier. And I think that in hindsight, if I were to do it differently, I think definitely a tiered approach is much better. Definitely have a plan. I literally free-falled. I was just like, someone's going to catch me. Lord, please catch me. I am just jumping right now. But I think that there are processes that people can follow if you're transitioning from state to private or from corporate to private. There are definitely best practices out there.
Yeah. But one of the things that really strikes me listening to you about that early stages of joining as an associate is you talking about like processes and that. But I think why you speak differently about business to a lot of other private practice owners is there's this common thread of people in your life who are business owners outside of the health profession. So your dad being an accountant and owning his own business, and then your friend who is a business coach, because you get that perspective from outside of the health practice, whereas a lot of practice owners only know the health space and then go into business. How much of an influence or how much did that contribute to, would you say, the success of what you've managed to achieve in private practice?
I think significantly. I think I started off with that healthcare mindset of treating and helping, and not to say that it's not there, but then I also just started reading. Hey, Tasneem, I just started reading and reading and reading and reading, and every time I found myself in business circles. So I removed myself from healthcare and I went to a group called Civitas, which is, I mean, these guys make billions, they make millions. These are South Africans who are business owners, and you're sitting on a table with them, and they're busy discussing their finances, they're discussing their investors, they're discussing all this stuff, and your mouth just drops. You're just like, oh, there's so much. And I'm like, oh, me and my little practice. And they're like, well, how many people have you hired? I'm like, oh, none. And it's like, well, you own a business and you're not hiring anyone. Like it doesn't compute. So I think a lot of the development comes in. It takes time, and it takes having the right systems in place. But to answer your question, I think the people that you surround yourself with, so the environments you find yourself in, definitely shape who you then become and what happens. So as part of the Leaders Library with Anne, we have a healthcare wing where we are looking at different business books and getting healthcare practitioners to start. But the truth of the matter is there's a bigger group out there of non-healthcare practitioners. But healthcare practitioners are so closed, if I can put it that way, that it almost makes more sense to start off in this group. But my goal and our goal is to move out of that, and for you as a practice owner to realize that you're a business owner first and have those principles and practices in place, and then you being a technician, you being a healthcare practitioner, which is innate. It's you'll never divorce yourself from that. What you need to assume is more the other aspects, and I think my circles, my environment has pushed me in that direction.
Do you think that having had that experience working in corporate in Alexander Forbes and being exposed to people who think differently to, when you just in a clinical space all the time, do you think that also contributed in some way to your development as a business owner?
I wonder, like, I definitely think there must have been some aspects of it, but when I was at Netcare Rehab, Dion Burrs, I think it is.
Was from
Burrs,
ProfNet,
yes,
from Business Net.
he was one of the directors at Netcare, and
Okay.
he so we were all in a clinical setting, but I can clearly remember one conversation I had with him. We were looking at my billing, and we were just talking about like fee for service structure versus retainer structures versus different models around payment. And so already then I could recognize that, this guy's got a slightly, like, his brain is geared towards something else. And I was attracted to that idea of, okay, so they're different models, and the models impact on behavior, and the behavior impacts on the treatment. So already those questions were coming along. And then when I went to Alexander Forbes, I mean, that was just it was a very stressful time, because you literally had to put your clinical brain on the side. Like, thanks, but you need to write this report quickly. You need to do this presentation within this amount of time, and you need to go and you need to show value. So what you're saying, what value are you bringing to the client? What is the return on investment? That was like the always at the forefront. What is your return on investment? They're like, I don't know. I just helped the guy I don't know how long it took. And so I think it was just like all of those conversations. And then, from there, then I did my diploma in health economics. And I mean, and that was fascinating. Just understanding how the decisions on healthcare delivery are actually based on economics and on money and on resources. And then being able to understand that resources are not there. There's a certain amount, and based on the amount, you have to make decisions. And I mean, as health economics would go, there are lots of models that you can use, and you just need to justify, and you need to back up the model that you choose to use. But it's still a model that you have to follow. And some people will get, and some people won't get. And so I think it was maybe just all of those, different aspects. And yeah, I mean, and my dad was worked in Swaziland, looking at small entrepreneurial businesses and seeing what resources they needed in order to move them to the next step. So at the beginning, I mean, I had many conversations with him with regards to, okay, this is where my business is. No, I don't have any money, but this is what I need to do. So it was just like one step at a time, moving forward in the right direction.
Yeah. But one of the things that, I mean, there's a lot of things that we can obtain from theory and from speaking to people. I mean, Dion is a physio, but he definitely got a natural affinity for business and things like that.
Yeah.
But then there's also this other thing that you speak about, which is around systems and processes, and using terms like CRMs, which people who are watching this probably won't even know that stands for customer relationship management. So those are terminologies that are often used in business. And I think it's what I've found is often the part that is very much lacking in practice owners, like not thinking of processes. A lot of the featured practice owners that I've had on here who are bigger practices, that seems to be the thing that differentiates them, that has enabled them to grow, is this thing of understanding the importance of systems and processes. So can you talk a little bit about that side of things, and how, especially because you are now a single mom, so I'm sure it was even more important to have that. So what has been your biggest learnings or advice that you would give people in terms of thinking of how you can leverage systems and processes to advance your business?
I think and I have watched a lot of the guys who've come on this YouTube channel, and the one thing is that I'm still a solopreneur, so I don't have anyone employed in terms of my business. So I don't have another OT fully employed in my business. So the importance of systems is like insurmountable. It's the only way to manage going forwards, because that's. You want to do a turnkey, you need to run your practice in a way that if someone else walked in through the door, they would know what to do and how to do it without you physically being there. And so like for me, one of my systems is I have an assistant, so I have a virtual assistant. So we will meet in the mornings, we'll go through all my emails and do a task list of what's required. And then once we've got the task list, whatever she can do, she will handle for me. Whatever I have to do, then I will do that. And so that's a system. It's simple. That's just simple system. Another system that I have with functional capacity evaluations is I see a person on the Tuesday. On that same day, I meet with an assistant to do the reporting and to do the scoring. I send it to someone to help me put it together. So another OT who's a consultant. But my system is that by that Friday, it needs to have gone to someone else to do the next thing so I can meet my turnaround time. That's a system. And so whether you're working with 10 or 2 or 1 person, I think creating the systems that allow you to know what the checks and balances are is what will help you. And it's also the decision making. You don't want to be creating things and then reinventing the wheel and then redoing it. And there's so many things. Like I'm falling in love with Loom. I put all of my stuff on Loom on video, and I will correct reports and I will do all of this. And then I send it to the person who needs to look at it. But I also have it as a library in terms of my standard operating procedures. I'll give you another example. Right now, I'm in the process of my one virtual assistant is in her notice period, and so I've got another one coming on. So I'm paying double this month for virtual assistants. But I've said at the end of the month, I need to get an operating manual because you're new, so you're still asking the questions. You're old, so you have all of the information. At the end of it, I should have a document that is an SOP that when I leave, someone else can come through and be able to just carry on and do it. But I'm also now at the point where I'm like, okay, I will get maxed out even with the systems. So now I am looking at, okay, how do I get help? How do I get more help in order to create it? But before I even hire someone, I need to have 3 months of money saved to be able to pay that person. I need to have all these documented systems because I need anyone to be able to do it. So long as you and OT and you've got the qualifications, even if you've been working for 1 month, I, as the business owner, need to put the system in place that anyone can plug into it. So with your 1 month of training meets the minimum requirements, and so I plug you in. I'm not going to go for an OT who's got 15 years of experience that needs to, unlearn, and it's a bit more of a process. So from a business point of view, my system needs to be stronger than any person. So
yes.
I think the systems that we create are imperative, and and I think I've shown it can be so simple. It's not this amazing laid out plan. Like whatever systems they have at Alexander Forbes probably totally outweigh what I do in my practice, but I still need those systems to give the client the reports at the right time and at the right quality. And if I don't have that, then it's going to be inconsistent. And we know that inconsistency in business will just make people not refer to you. So if I get a good report today and I get a terrible one tomorrow, I'll be like, well, maybe you're having a bad day, but that's not going to help me as the customer paying. So the consistency needs to be there. The only way we can have consistency is with systems.
Yeah. So, I think one of the things that you're saying, which is so important, is that when we use words like systems and processes, it sounds so complicated and fancy. But at the end of the day, what it really is it's a recipe. And you can make a complicated chocolate cake and you can make a simple chocolate cake. It just depends on the need right at hand. But that's all it is. It's a set of steps and ingredients. What tools and resources do you need? And what are the steps you need to follow to get this end result, right? And so it can even be like you're talking about things like templates. So, if you have a set template, even with my good fit calls, I have a set list of questions. I might not answer all of them, but it's a standard. I don't have to now think on the tip of my tongue, so I know I have a standard way that I'm qualifying clients as, will they be a good fit for my service or not? And I think that's really what it is how do you remove the mental load from yourself so that you can do the real work, the real thinking, the real clinical reasoning, because you don't have to think about these other things. They become automated, they become habitual, or you can just fall back on a recipe and not have to remember the whole thing, which I think is really important for all practice owners, whether you're on a solopreneur or you are employing like tens of other therapists. It's all the same thing. So, yeah, thank you for that. So, I wanted to ask you though. So, you mentioned that you're obviously doing the functional capacity work through the private practice and you went into the ergonomics, which has taken on more of a product based consultancy aspect. How do you differentiate between ergonomics consulting and the therapy work? And especially because you're saying, like it's quite a new space. In, and also like there's not a lot of guidelines to fall back on in terms of scope of practice, and because it's quite a new area. So how do you find operating in a new space, because you're basically a disruptor in the space in effect, right? Which is not an easy place to be, but it's also exciting. So what are some of the learnings from this experience, and how do you differentiate between your two roles?
So differentiating, I have I have different websites. So if you go onto the Motsa OT website, that's me as an OT doing the FCEs and that aspect of it. And then I have another website which is looking purely at ergonomics. And so my referrals thus far have come in various forms. So the work is mainly from another, let's say, occupational practitioner who doesn't really like doing office stuff, so then they want me to do the office stuff. So then I go there as a technician doing the OT stuff, the ergonomics, office ergonomics, under their skill set. So there's a collaboration, I think, that comes in with the ergonomics, because there isn't one expert that can do a lot of it. And because we are all still kind of looking at the different programs, it's really been a trial and error, meeting people, being in the right circles, LinkedIn, like dropping direct messages, having conversations. So how are you dealing with this? How do you interpret this? And just being open with the mindset that I am an ergonomics consultant, but I'm part of a bigger group. There are so many other role players and so many more experienced role players in it. So how do I bring my unique OT skills, which are very needed, into this mix, into this pool, and so it's been a more of like a networking, trying to understand, getting information, being in the right places. And the other time I was actually talking to a consultant. I think he's based in Texas, and when I were going through like this business strategy around ergonomics, his question was, where are they? Where are the people who need these services? Where are they sitting? What are they doing? So, you don't want to come at it from a direct point of view. You want to do it in a way that you are almost sitting in the same room as them, if that makes sense. So your marketing languages changes a little bit. And as you develop and as a clinician, as a person, I think the change also comes in your business outlook. And I was also in a room with another business owner. He's like got 10 businesses. He's sold, he's started a new one, and he was saying often his businesses have evolved based on where he was and what his age and where he was in life. And I think I think that's the beauty of working with yourself, working for yourself, is that your opportunities in your businesses also can come from your growth period and where you are. So I really do feel ergonomics is a little bit more of like mature conversations, like understanding of your role within a bigger party. You're not gonna come in there guns blazing, like, listen, I'm the expert, I know everything, I like da da da. Like, no, that's not where we're at. It's more in terms of just being collaborative in your approach. Where else with the FCE OT, work, no one can come to me and say that anyone can do a better FCE than OTs. Like, we've got a track record, like where are you even gonna start with those type of conversations? So I think it's just reading the room, so to speak, and understanding where you are. So I've really had a slightly different approach with my ergonomics consulting, and it's paid off.
So speaking of reading the room, I'm glad you brought that up, because one of the questions I really wanted to ask you is, having now had experience in both clinical, in hospital setting, and in corporate, What would you say for young OTs out there who are just graduating, just finished ComServe, and they kind of feel like, you know what, I've always wanted to be in corporate, but I've had this heart for health. Like, I see there's this opportunity where I can merge the two, and they feel they want to go into a corporate setting, but they are afraid of having now only been in that circle of health. Like, how do you now, read the room, approach it in a more corporate type way? Like, how do you handle yourself? How do you communicate? Like, what advice would you give to these young up and coming OTs who really want to explore the corporate space?
I mean, I think there are numerous opportunities in the corporate space, and that's thanks to all the OTs that have gone before us. And so, when you see a job application, generally they are actually looking for clinicians. They are looking for the clinical reasoning that you have as a young OT, and then just shaping it in terms of their own products or policies that they have. So I think the more clinical background you have, the better chance you have, because the whole thing in corporate as a clinician is to bring the clinical skills into the corporate space. So you do need to demonstrate your clinical ability and reasoning and practicality. So one of the challenges is often when we're looking at reporting, having recommendations that are just like which planet are you from? It's like, no, we're in South Africa. This is the resource allocation. This is what is feasible for people where we are. And so if you've got that clinical background, the understanding is that you've worked in government, you know what the limitations are, you know practically what can happen, and you're not only coming at it from a theoretical point of view. So I think there's a great market for young clinicians to move into corporate. I think there's a bigger move towards wellness, especially mental health. And so I think I'll just encourage people to look on LinkedIn, find the job opportunities and apply if you've got a strong clinical background that works in your favor.
So I want to get into, you mentioned obviously the leaders library. And I have this one last question around private practice, which will also lead into the work you're doing in the Leaders Library. And it's the talk about money. So let's talk a little bit about money. Obviously, a lot of practice owners, I mean, it's shocking to me how many practice owners, when I do webinars and things, and I ask, how many of you are paying yourself a salary? There are so many who have been in practice for like 10 years and are not paying themselves a salary. They're kind of just taking what they can from their practice. Which is it's not how things should be if you're running a business, right? So you're basically a slave to your business. So talk to me a little bit about the money conversation and health professionals. Like, what do you view, having now from a personal experience and from your involvement with Leaders Library and being exposed to people who are starting practices, what do you think the biggest obstacle or challenge or reason is that health professionals are struggling to make money in private practice?
I think because we don't ask the right questions. When the other guys are starting a business, their first question is, how much profit am I going to make out of this? I have investors. What are they going to get from me running this business? There's a gap in the market, but what are the profit margins? Are we looking at 5%? Are we looking at 10%? Are we looking at 15%? That is the first question that is asked. And you need to know the end before you can start working towards it. So you need to have a clearly defined end goal in terms of what you want your profit margins to be. And, within healthcare, I mean, we're not really looking at like high profit margins. Between 5, 10, 15% as a profit margin is probably as much as you are looking at. But you have to have one. You can't not have a profit margin. Otherwise, you're not in business. Even if it is 1%, you have to have a profit margin. And if you don't look at your business in terms of creating profit, then what are you doing? Then just go back and go work for someone else. Go back into corporate. Go into healthcare. If you cannot put aside 1% in terms of profit, then in my humble personal opinion, then you're not in business. Listen, if you want to serve people, that's great. But if you're going to take up your time and your energy and time away from your children then it's rather a hobby or, I don't know, community service. But if you
Mm.
are serious about business, you need to start with the profit. And I think a lot of people don't get that. I mean, a lot of investors will expect a profit within the first 3 months. So
Mm.
you need to start with that understanding that any business, for it to be called a business, for it to be sustainable, needs cash flow, and it needs to be making money. Because if we're also not wise with how we are managing our finances, then the 2 or 3 people that you have employed and the people that you're serving are not going to get served. The only way people
Mm.
can get served is if you are gaining an income from the work that you're doing. And money is a thank you. That's what money is. It's like, oh, thank you. You helped me. Oh, thank you for helping me with this. Oh, thank you. That's what money is. Money is a token that the world has recognized as an exchange for a service. And
Mm.
you won't walk into a coffee shop and order a cafe latte and then just be like, okay, cheers, bye. You know that you have to pay for it and you're happy to pay for it because you want the coffee. But when we're
Mm.
looking at our services, sometimes we're not charging people. Sometimes we're giving out our information for free. Sometimes we're
Mm.
undercutting ourselves and underbilling, giving detailed, amazing, substantial reports at half the price that it's actually taken you. Why?
Yes.
Why are you doing that?
Mm.
If you're
Mm.
not able to do a cost analysis for yourself, get someone to help you. If you're not
Yeah.
able to do a profit margin, get someone. I mean, Tasneem, you do that in your programs. You sit and we look at the finances. You need to
Mm.
have a profit margin, even if it is 1% from day one. Otherwise, I think you must
Mm.
just go
Yeah.
go go and
And
help someone else.
And I think what's important about you stressing about even if it's 1% is because sometimes that is also a mindset issue. That even if you're saying, okay, it's only 1%, which is not good enough, but the fact that you're now thinking of profit first, do you know what I
Yeah,
mean? Shifts your mindset. And that over time, hopefully, will increase that percentage because now, because from my perspective, experience of chatting to our professionals, a lot of that comes from that mindset block. But that's what I wanted to now lead into the discussion about Leaders Library. Because
mm.
what was your motivation, or how did it come about, the whole Leaders Library and your collaboration with Anne? Tell me about how you and the Solutioneers, like what was that? How did that collaboration come about, and what is the main like goal or vision that you have for creating this amazing community?
Mm. So I think the journey with Solutionaires is the first time I approached Anne. She was doing a business book. I don't remember what book it was. And she invited entrepreneurs to read the book and then to discuss the recommendations and to implement. Because I don't know the stat, but there's some stat you can read a book and you hardly retain anything. But if you read it
Mm,
in a group and there's accountability, there's a higher retention rate. And
mm,
they are jewels and gems in a lot of these books that are available, but it's the
mm,
implementation. Because if it stays as head knowledge, then and you're not implementing it, then what are you doing? So her
mm,
model is read the book, which is a low entry point. I mean, what's a book? It's 250 on Audible. It's maybe 300, 400 Rand if you get it. And then meet on a weekly basis after you've read the chapter to implement what you've learned. And
mm,
so I
mm,
went onto her first program and I was like, sure, this is really a need for healthcare practitioners. As a healthcare practitioner, I struggled and I stumbled a lot in terms of understanding those concepts. And then it led to us doing a book together called How to Grow Your Small Business. But we only invited healthcare practitioners to that first cohort. And again, it was like, what is marketing again? Okay, but we're not allowed to do it. So a lot of people are like, ah, can't do it. I'm not going to do anything. But it's like, no, you can do some things. Yes, you can't do that, but you can do this. Yes, you can't do that and that, but you can do this, and this, and this. And so
yes.
it's also just like teaching and guiding and being like, well, I've done this and this person's done that. So, you can do this. Someone who's also South African, who's also a healthcare practitioner, because also the thing with these books that we read is they're often for American
Mm,
communities. They're not healthcare. So you can read a business book, but then you're like, well, what can I actually implement? And so
yes.
the whole idea is, yes, read the principles, but this is what we're going to do practically on
Mm,
a day-to-day basis. Within our legislation, within the HPCSA regulations, this is what we can do. And then once we had done a couple of those, then we looked at developing a 2-day module, because that was the requests we're getting from the people who were doing the smaller courses. Like, well, can you not take us through this in a little bit more detail? And so then we ran our first launch of Grow Your Healthcare Practice, the business side of your practice, and at Gibbs earlier this year. So Anne's background is in digital transformation, and she has a master's in business admin. So she comes with the paperwork to kind of back up the stuff that we've created. And then I came from always asking her questions like, can I do this? How do you do this? I mean, I'll give you an example right now. I had a client who, from a product point of view, I sent them a quote of how much a product is that I'm selling from ergonomics. And because it's a bulk request, there's discounts that can be put there because it's a product, it's not therapeutic, it's not me as an OT doing it. So ethically, I can do a discount there, but I didn't know that previously. I would have heard the client say discount and I'd have run for miles because I'm like, no, I can't do that. But there's no therapeutic relationship there. It's a product. So now I know, but before I didn't know. So part of the process of meeting together is to interrogate these things and kind of understand them. So then we came up with the 2-day business course at Gibbs, and we got great feedback from that. And so we've done that. And now in a month and a bit, in the 30th of September, we're launching an online version of that same course. So we're going to be meeting for an hour for the teaching and then 30 minutes of coaching to go through the business principles. And I find that I learned a lot from coaching. I learned a lot from practically doing things and asking questions within a small group. So that's why we're combining the information with the practical. So you have a workbook, have to put in the work, because putting in the work is what creates the outcomes that you want. Sitting and listening to people is not going to give you the outcomes. So our online program is designed in the same way, where there's a part teaching and a part coaching, and then homework that you need to do the next week and the next week and the next week until the 8 weeks is done. And then, Anne also comes with the coaching background. So, if there are problems or challenges, after that, then you can also go for coaching with her or assistance, and then also have the community that we're creating to propel us forward in the right direction. Because I think it's also a bit lonely being a practice owner, because you are not necessarily surrounded by people who are running businesses. You might be surrounded by your employees and your consultants and your other OTs or physios or whatever field you're in, but you have to surround yourself with business owners, and from an environmental point of view, you need to surround yourself with people who are way ahead of you, because that's the only way that you will grow. If you are the person in the room that everyone goes to and asks questions, and you've got a problem because you're just going to stay there. You have to surround yourself with people who are 10 steps, 5 steps, 2 steps ahead of you, so that you can get that knowledge. And that's what's helped me in my business point of view. And that is why I asked Anne to create this for healthcare practitioners to move in that direction. Yeah.
And I mean, the feedback I've seen from the people who have attended your 2 in-person ones has been really positive. So obviously, online makes it more accessible to people who are not in Johannesburg, for example. But then outside of the Grow Your Healthcare Practice course that you've put together, the Leaders Library and the read-ins that you do, is that going to continue? Is that something that you're going to continue with?
Yeah. I mean, I've got 3 books that I really want to do next year for healthcare practitioners that have really impacted me this year. The one is called Profit First by Mike McCallowitz. And that book I don't know if you've read it. Have you read it yet?
Yes. It's part of when I used to have the academy, it was part of the financial fitness module. It was around Profit First. It's definitely something that I also talk a lot about. He's got another book also called Clockwork, which is about processes, which is also very interesting.
Yes. And he's doing another book now on personal finances. So even if you don't join or anything, I think that book is fantastic, but it's also better to do it in a group so you can put those systems together, because it's mind-blowing what he says. And I think if you read it on your own, you're going to be like, this guy is on weed, or he's like totally crazy, I am not doing this. But if you're in a
Yeah.
group of like-minded people, you can be like, oh, okay, all right, so Phumla did it. Okay, Phumla is also South African. Okay, Phumla looks a little bit like me. Okay, yeah, okay, maybe
Yeah.
I can try that.
Yeah.
But otherwise, sometimes these guys just say stuff and you're just like, they're from a different planet. And I think Profit First is one of
Mm-hmm.
those. But we're definitely going to do that. 6 week read along. You come out, you have to read the chapters, you have to do the homework, you have to come online, put your camera on, and practically do the work. And then we'll probably do how to grow your small business again. Because of all the operating and leadership stuff. I personally struggle with leadership.
Mm-hmm.
So I need the skill set on how to lead people so that I can create the business models that I want. So I do
Mm-hmm.
like doing recaps of a business overall. What is it supposed to look like? It's supposed to have 6 parts. What are those parts? What are my ratings in each of those parts? And each time I do it, I can take a one step forward. I can take another step forward, because that will enable me to meet my goals. So we're gonna do
Mm-hmm.
those definitely. The third one, I think it's still out on jury in terms of what that is, but we're also happy to get feedback from others in terms of what
Yeah.
what book they want. I'm tossing between Pumpkin Plan is another mic one, but
Mm.
I'm not entirely sure. Or we might do the E Myth. So yeah, but definitely 3 books next year, and it's life changing. Your business will be in such a different place if you actually apply the stuff.
Yes. So,
Yeah.
another book that maybe you can consider, which isn't a
Yeah.
business book, but I think it's really important, personal development in order to be able to implement things,
Mm-hmm.
because essentially it's developing habits, which is atomic habits.
Mm.
Learning how to develop good habits as a business owner. And then also for people who are, not everybody wants to grow a business where they have lots of employees. There is another book called Company of One. I can't remember the author's name. I have the book, but
Okay.
it's a really good book for this guy. He's got a business which is a really successful business from a
Yeah.
financial point of view. But he always wanted to just have a small business. He works remotely. So it's not to say you don't have people that work for you. Like you can have virtual assistants, you have contractors, all of those things. But he talks about the structure of a business where growth doesn't always necessarily mean more people. We tend to think if you're not making profit but you have a massive company, then are you really successful? So he talks about the basic foundational principles of growing a financially successful business,
Love
but
it.
but using the concept of keeping it small in order to grow rather than growing for the sake of growing. Do you know what I
This is
mean?
why
So
I
that's
love talking to you.
another book that you can consider. But how do people who are listening to this, how do they get involved if this sounds like something that they are interested in? They really need that accountability. They want to be part of a community. They want to really think out the box. How do they get involved?
So Anne Gray is on LinkedIn, and myself, Phumla Motsa, is on LinkedIn. If you're on LinkedIn, just DM us and we'll definitely send you the information. Or you can go on to www.leaderslibrary, and I'll send you the links for that. And if you go on there, you can register. I mean, our community is free, so anyone can go
Mm,
on. It's similar to your
mm,
Facebook one, where you can go onto it, and any masterclasses that we're doing, we pop them in there so that you can get the information. And then only when you are ready, then you can join us for a book, for a read along with a book, or join one of the courses. So those are the main
okay.
areas. We are also the Leaders Library is also on TikTok, on Instagram, on anywhere, everywhere. So
Mm.
if you just look up Leaders Library, then you'll find the
Yeah,
information.
and I'll definitely put the links all in the description box below the video. I don't know what date it will be that this is actually now on the internet, but I'll put all the links down at the bottom so that people can keep. And obviously, if they follow you on social media, then they'll be able to keep track of like the courses and that that you have
Yeah.
in future. But let's end off with what's the future of for Pumla. So, what is aside from Leaders Library now? Like, what is next for Pumla in terms of your business journey? Like, where do you see yourself in the next 5 to 10 years?
Mm. So, I mean, I think I want to evolve with my boys, with my children. So, they are 14 and 11 now. So, the next 5 years is really just taking them through university, high school, and then depending on where they go for university, they
Mm,
have to go to the same place.
Okay.
unfortunately. And then I am going to move to wherever they are. Like,
Okay.
so my goal is to have a remote business that I can basically
Mhm.
work from anywhere, because
Okay.
I need to be available to them, and and be there in one way or the
Yeah.
other. So my goal is very much aligned with their decisions in terms of tertiary.
Mhm. Okay.
Yeah.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much. It was a really refreshing conversation to have, and I'm sure people will learn so much from you. And as I said, all the links in order to
Yeah.
know how to follow along with you and learn further from you will all be in the description box. But I want to wish you all the best for all your future endeavors, for the courses, Leaders Library, for your own personal businesses, and of course for your boys. It's really an exciting time. I have now somewhat a boy in. I can't even call him a boy anymore. He's a man now in varsity, and then it's two in primary, one in high school, and it's really, I think we talk about all these things about business, but I think the parenting part is probably the part that is a little bit harder. It's a whole journey on its own. So I wish you luck for all of those things,
Thank you.
and thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you so much, Tazim, for having me.